As you may have been reading, you might not have done, changes to the way iTunes is going to operate via Apple. Let's find out more about that. Matt Porter is the Gadget Man. Hi, Matt.
Hello there.
Thank you very much for joining us, as always, Matt. What are these changes, my friend?
Well, for years, iTunes has been kind of like a central repository for media on Apple machines, iMacs and iPhones and things like that. And what they're doing now, or Apple is intending to do now, is kind of split it so that movies are separate and music is separate. And basically media is separated into, I think, 3 different segments, which kind of makes sense because they have their own radio service already, online radio service, and they have their home TV service, Apple TV. So I think it's kind of like bringing everything into line rather than having this, like I said, like a central repository. Years ago when we used iPods and things like that, that's how we transferred our music onto our iPods. But of course, these things are now wireless generally now, and there isn't that kind of need to synchronise.
Is there going to be anything that we notice as users of iTunes, do you think? Is it suddenly going to stop working?
No, I think it's just being merged. They're sort of not merging. That's the opposite to merging. They're kind of separating these services, so I don't think there will be. iTunes, on the whole, I use a Mac myself, and I find I rarely use it, to be fair. I use other services and streaming services, so I'm not sure whether people will notice it. I think that when the new version of the Mac OS is launched later in the year, then that's when those iTunes itself will be replaced.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because as you say, back in the days of the iPod and the early iPhones, the iTunes was essential to get your music onto your device. Nowadays, I don't know whether the days of that way of playing music may be numbered, Matt.
Well, it was essential because at the time, Apple, when Apple launched their iPods, they copy protected the music that you could put on it, so you could only use iTunes to buy music to put onto iPods. It was all what's called DRM, digital rights management, and there was uproar at the time because people couldn't effectively download music from an iPod and play it elsewhere. It would only work on the one ID, if you like, one that counts. Yeah. But that's kind of since been dropped. But it was dropped after the market was completely cornered anyway. So, it was a kind of way of synchronising copy-protected music at the time. So that's kind of gone out of the window because I think a majority of people do listen to music on a streaming service anyway.
Fluctuating fortunes for Apple these days. Obviously, the loss of Steve Jobs is still being felt there. But how would you rate the future of Apple genuinely, as in terms of, I guess, the iPhone, which is their big thing?
I think the iPhone continues to be extremely popular. It's got a very, very large fan base, and once you go with a particular operating system on a phone, you become happy and used to it, and moving elsewhere becomes difficult. So I think they have a captive audience. They are reliant primarily really on the iPhone, and they realise that, which is why they've continuously tried to launch other products to try and branch out, really. It kind of saved them. The iPhone saved them. It was such a great product at the time and such good timing that that their market value is reliant on its sales. But then you have China as a gigantic market where Apple may not be, or iPhones may not be as popular because you have the other big players there who are selling billions of phones themselves, like Huawei, who obviously don't have a problem selling their products in China.
No,
even
not as much as they do elsewhere. Yeah.
Well, they're kind of, there's issues around Huawei, which is a completely different thing. Yeah. But there are other Chinese manufacturers that have larger market shares in China, and it's a gigantic market. So, and then you get the developing markets like India and and Asia and places like that where people's maybe don't have the available money to pay for something like an iPhone, so they'll go for an Android One device, a cheaper Android device. So, yeah, I think it's about them trying to please everybody as well as their fans.
We shouldn't notice any difference, the iTunes users. Matt Porter is the Gadget Man on the update. Matt, thank you very much.